you'd think that people would know more, but leasing is really an art. Backed by data science, but it's an art. So sometimes you got to sell people on a neighborhood, and you got to be able to understand. If you're leasing a home and you don't physically live in the market, you got to understand the neighborhood. A renter's vetting you out just as much as you're vetting out them. We want to show that if you call us, we're picking up the phone. You have a question, we're here for you. So I think that's probably a big one with tenants. You are fighting a brand new home that's probably larger, probably got the most updated features, and they're offering 1 to 2 months free, and that's the front that you're fighting.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
You're pretty lucky I'm here today. I'm going to have to carry the weight.
I probably would have canceled on our guest had you not been here.
Well, the truth is we have a guest today that actually gets stuff done. And so if we can fit it into his tight schedule, we're going to have to do it. So you're going to have to suck it up. This is your 4th podcast of the day.
I'm here. I'm alive. It's the end of the day. So this is it. After this one, I'm going home.
That's why I'm going to be carrying all the water today.
Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce our esteemed guest?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of Brett just getting lobbed out major job offers.
This is why I don't bring Evernest people on the podcast.
Well, you definitely don't put marketing people on because you don't want to lose that. But I will tell you, like, one of the great things we've done is just accumulated just incredibly competent people. And this guy is like literally one of our most competent and sharpest, and just gets tons of stuff done here at Evernest. But Brett Drevlow is our head of leasing. Like, he runs our whole leasing department. And this guy is a leasing ninja. And some of the stuff that you people have probably started to see him posting on LinkedIn about leasing. Mm-hmm. And leasing is just becoming a bigger and bigger topic today because it's getting harder and harder to lease a house. Right. I mean, you used to just stick a sign in the yard and put a lockbox on the door and stick it on Zillow and it would lease. But it's getting tougher. And so wanted to bring Brett on the show. And Brett, thanks for joining us because we know you're a busy dude, unlike Spencer.
Well, thanks for having me. It's hard to. Thank you for the very kind words. Happy to be here. To your point, leasing is a bigger topic. Not just something that Evernest is trying to more publicly speak more and more about. You see a lot of very interesting debate happening online with strategies, how to, all that type of stuff. Leasing is my passion. I've been doing it for quite some time now. Earlier this year, had the joy of leasing my own rental for the first time. Was able to finally make that jump. So through and through, I am all about leasing.
Brett
made the jump. I don't know what kind of jump that is. Be careful.
It's an empathetic jump.
Right.
Brett, give the audience an idea of scale. Like, how many houses are currently available? How many houses does the team lease every month?
Yeah. So looking at some of our data here, let's see. Right now we've got about 800 units on the market.
And for reference, we're recording this September 10th.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we've seen inventory continue to rise. Renewals have kind of dipped or flat, slight dip here over the backside of peak season, and then, rent trends have retracted notably in some of our market, select markets. So it's made conditions a little more difficult. We have 950 total homes in the market. So we've got about 150 where we're in that pre-market stage where we're not showing them quite yet, but we are marketing them. So that's what we've got there. In terms of sign-in leases and move-ins, right now we're taking anywhere from 350 to 400 move-ins a month. So processing quite a bit there.
That's incredible. And give us an idea, like over the last, 5 years, you heard me say, it was really easy to lease a home back in 2021, 2022, and it's gotten harder and harder. Like, on a national scale, how do you think about that over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've really noticed change over the past few years is there's like more technology in the space, centralized leasing, offshore leasing, off-site leasing. There's just so many different models. I think people are really still trying to figure out those models and how they work, when they work. I think a lot of people get focused on technology being the strategy, and it's kind of this. You got to figure out how to make technology work with human judgment. I don't think that's something that is talked about enough. Far too often, homes make their way to the market, and then they get into this mode of set it and forget it for these large players, or even smaller operators that don't quite know how to lease a home from like a sales and resident service, customer service perspective. So, I think people are trying to figure it out still. And you'd think that people would know more, but leasing is really, really an art. Backed by data science, but it's an art.
And we have a number of team members that you manage that are communicating with potential residents at all times. What are you coaching them right now on? Like where do you see the biggest advantage, the biggest lever point?
Yeah, overcoming objections is the big one. Building trust. We do a lot of our leasing remotely. We do have some markets and certain homes where we will do on-site, like an agent showings, in-person showings. But for our staff, it's helping educate them on the market, understanding the nuances of the market from a relative standpoint of being able to speak to local inventory and local conditions, that type of stuff. But overcoming objections is the big one. Hearing customers and their concerns. Far too often you get on the phone. I don't know if you guys have tried to lease a home or just went out and secret shopped, but sometimes it's you take feedback and you get a response and that's it. We want to be receptive and empathetic to the feedback that we're getting from residents. Got to understand and respect the rental environment. People are more rent burdened now than they've ever been, and that trend continues. So you want to be, empathetic of the concerns renters are going through. And, half of it is you do still need to win them over with the concept of renting, and you got to sell them on the concept that we are a good, competent, and empathetic, property manager. So
well, you just mentioned like the objections you're getting. What are some of the most common objections that you're having to coach the team on?
Yeah, price always is a big one, especially for market conditions as they are now. When rent trends start kind of dipping backwards, price is the number one thing. Fees don't come up as much as you would expect they do. When I was in multifamily leasing, fee objections were probably like our top 3 objections. Here, so at Evernest, I'd say I don't think they make the top 8 for our objections. So I think that's interesting. Neighborhood is a huge one. And we have such a, scattered, we have kind of a wide type of product that we offer. So, in Kansas City, maybe a tough neighborhood. I do have a specific neighborhood kind of in the back of my mind. People are asking, hey, does it come with a security camera? And hey, I see the house next door boarded up. Sometimes you got to sell people on a neighborhood, and you got to be able to understand, if you're leasing a home and you don't physically live in the market, you got to understand the neighborhood, you got to understand the doors on that street, what's going on there. Is it, a gentrified area? What's, all that type of stuff, because people are asking those types of questions more and more.
And is our team communicating mostly on the phone? Is it text? How are we communicating with potential residents?
Yeah, we're heavy phone, both pickup and outbound. I'd say we're probably 65-70% outbound, probably somewhere in the 30%, text, and then email is a distant, single digit percentage, very low. Our team spends time probably making 40 or so outbound calls a day, and then inbound calls a day. It's not unheard of to take 40 inbound calls. and then they're managing their text on top of that too.
That's per person, by the way, not total.
Yeah, per person. Yeah.
And then as you think about the funnel, does one person on our team follow somebody all the way through the funnel, or are they handing them off at each stage in the funnel?
Yeah, there's a couple of stages, and I would say we're handing off strategically. So I'll kind of walk you through it. So new lead comes in, they call Evernest, and they'll get connected with our contact center, who team is very knowledgeable in leasing, or they'll get connected with the leasing coordinator. Kind of depends on how you get in touch with us. When you speak with the leasing coordinator, they're going to know the most about the property. They're going to answer all the questions, all that type of stuff, help you make sure you have a good, successful showing. You can see the home, and then we answer questions on qualifications, all that type of stuff, lease terms. And then when an applicant applies, they'll apply through our application software, and they'll be passed to our team of, we call them underwriters. And this team knows, based on the home, this is the criteria that we're screening you for. That team is, deliberately separated because we want, third-party objective decisions made on an application. So that's the point of, why the handoff there. And then once that team concludes their review, they'll kick it back over to leasing to execute a deposit and a signed lease. And then once we've got a signed lease in hand, the applicant will be put in touch with what we call a move-in coordinator. It's a newer position that we have started this year, but we found good success in. Customers are responding very well to it. Someone that can walk you through the resident experience, educate you on all the programs and offerings that Evernest has available. And then we make sure that your home is ready for move-in, and then we get you in the door successfully. You're set up to make payments. You know exactly what your responsibilities are as a Evernest resident. So
remind me to show you the video we did one time of that. Have you seen that video?
Which one?
It's like a move-in video that we showed.
Yeah, with the guy coming in parking in the driveway.
Yeah, the
and
Disney,
coming in.
kind of like a Disney type movie. One of my brain children.
Yeah, it was incredible. That was before I came in and saved marketing from the Matthews leadership. I'd be curious, Brett, thinking about all of the information you're receiving. You got these houses out there, they're on the market. How are you communicating? How is your team communicating with the PMs who are then communicating with the owners? Or are you all directly communicating with the owners when you're seeing things like, hey, it may be time for a price drop, or would you consider this? I mean, how are you all feeding in to help owners make really good decisions?
Yeah, so, to kind of directly answer the question and give some context, our property managers are the point of contact for the owners. We want to keep that streamlined point of contact so an owner knows that, hey, you just reach out to one person about this. You don't got to, figure out who you're reaching out to for what functions. The leasing team is partnered very closely we've got an internal pricing department. It's made up of two folks that know very well how to comp a home and make recommendations on pricing to get that home to move quickly. That team reviews listings. They kind of have like a set of criteria that puts listings on a list for them to review. They make a documented and formal recommendation over to the property manager. Property manager will relay that to the owner. And then alongside that, we have weekly touch points where the leasing team will meet with the property manager group, and we'll go over market conditions, specific units, what feedback are we hearing, what objections are we facing, what did people say from their showings, all of that type of stuff, general updates on the property. We'll pass that information back and forth and on a weekly basis, and then our PMs will take that to the owners to make some strategic decisions.
Talk about how we comp a home. I think now that we feel like prices are softening, particularly in some markets, getting a good comp is really important. Talk about how we do those CMAs.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's tough. Everyone thinks that they can go on Zillow and check out Zestimate and figure out their rent. Even to some extent, myself included, part of the reason I really wanted to rent out my first home was to just gain some perspective on that owner experience. I thought that'd be interesting, other than, a personal desire to do that. Looking at, I think it's easy to look at your home, look at Zestimate, look at, there's a bunch of tools out there that we currently use and we've looked at. And, something that I've noticed is these tools out there really struggle to get stuff like asset type. So like single family home versus modular versus townhome. Some of these, systems really struggle to comp, home type. They tend to comp well on bedroom type, but not so much home type. And then beyond that, sometimes it's, I think tough for owners to hear this, but sometimes some of the sometimes what you think is an outstanding selling feature might actually be working against you a little more than you think. Something like ginormous square footage, like a 3-bedroom, 4,000 square foot home, you would think, oh, everyone's going to want this. But I'll tell you, my wife would say this: we got to fill it up with a bunch of furniture that we don't have.
Got to clean it.
Exactly. It's a lot of space to clean too. Stuff like that. Pools. Depending on the market, depending on the demographic. Some people really love pools, and some places it's more of a burden.
Massive yards, big, huge yards they have to keep up and cut and all that during the summer is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot of grass to cut, a lot of maintenance. So, and these tools, kind of the overall theme here is these tools really struggle to account for those things. And when a renter shows up, they tour your home, they check it out online. These are the things that they're thinking about. And these are the things that are influencing whether, they're going to click, submit inquiry or, contact us. So
talk about the mind of a renter. I've always had a framework I thought about, but I'm curious, when you think like, hey, we're trying to attract a resident to this home, how do you get into the mind of the renter?
Yeah, I spend so much time secret shopping around to understand what other people are doing. I also, do dialogue with a lot of friends that are renters. And I think, a couple of themes really kind of reign supreme for me on that front. One, a renter's vetting you out just as much as you're vetting out them. A renter wants to know that you're going to be a good, responsive, steward of the home that they're living in. They want to know that, you're not going to, clean their clock when it comes to a security deposit errantly. They want to know that, when they have a maintenance request, you're going to fulfill it. So I think, in some ways, when leasing is engaging with a tenant, or a prospective tenant, we're setting that expectation. If we're slow to respond in leasing, the tenant is picking up on stuff like that and thinking, man, they're slow to take my application. They're probably going to be slow to fulfill my maintenance request. So for us, speed is important from the sense of, building trust in the prospective resident from day one. Same goes with phone call pickup rates, which is a huge focus at Evernest, has been my entire time here, and probably one of my proudest stats, I'd say, of our group that, we've really worked to, pick up the phone as consistently as possible. We want to show that if you call us, we're picking up the phone. You have a question, we're here for you. So I think that's probably a big one with tenants.
And you had somebody on your team that signed, I think last quarter, like almost like a lease a day for the 90 days, or maybe it was a month, that there was like a lease a day for 30 days. Like incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we do have a couple of those. Probably this quarter we've probably got 3 or 4 folks doing that. But yeah, for let's see, quarters 2 and quarter 3, we've probably got people. I'd say 4 to 5 people, which makes up maybe a quarter of the leasing staff. They're signing a lease a day. So we got quite a bit of volume coming through. A lot of phone calls being picked up. So
I know that like for a landlord, for an owner, it's a pretty stressful time when they have a house sitting on the market, right? It's vacant. They're not receiving any kind of rent. So there's a lot of uncertainty for them at that point. How are you equipping like the property managers to like, how are you helping them make better decisions? Owners make better decisions. When should they drop the price? Those types of things.
Yeah, I would say there's kind of 2 fronts that, we handle that. So one, we've got our, pricing team that is continuously, on that list I had referenced earlier, they're getting homes on a list, they're reviewing in a documented manner, providing comps, making recommendations. That's happening on a pretty quick turnaround cadence. The second piece of it, where I'd say, I come in is I think it's my role as a, my role for the organization to understand and know what the rent trends are and understand how do we communicate that to owners relative to occupancy and vacancy. So if it's taken us, there's a specific zip code in Alabama right now where properties on average, both Evernest listings and non-Evernest listings is averaging 3 leads a month, that zip code. Wow. It's just a really slow market, no demand. A market like that, if we have a home that's available, it is our responsibility to communicate those conditions to the owner. So what I would do is, I would, leverage data that I can access through our ILS and, what we have internally, and provide that information and, put it in context for our property managers and let them know, it takes an average of 28 leads to lease a home. If you've only got 3 in a month, do the math. It's going to take you months to lease that home. So you're at a junction where, 2 months free rent or 1 month free rent doesn't sound so expensive, when you're looking at vacancy. So I think, I try to grab that type of data at a market, at a sub-market, and even like local levels, and provide that to our PMs to help educate them so that they can educate their owners and, contextualize what the demand means for them.
Talk about the technology that we use. What is the leasing technology stack? Yeah.
So let's see, what's our tech stack? So we've got our internal CRM open. I'm sure it's been talked about on the show here a couple of times. We have an integration with Rently. We've been partnered with Rently for about 4 months now, and things have been going well. Rently does a great job of identity verification on the front end for tours. So we provide through an automated feed our information on the home. It's kind of like a product knowledge for every home that is fed to Rently on it's like every 20 minutes. We pass them a data file, and it updates all of our listings, which passes to all of the independent listing services. The apartments.com, the Zumper, the Zillow, HotPads, Trulia, the entire, rent.com, the whole gamut. And it updates those on their cadences. And as leads come in, they get passed through Rently, where if they want to schedule a showing for one of these homes, they got to upload their ID, selfie, and complete a couple of steps in order to be able to access a home. And then all of our access control for our hardware on our homes, we're using about 90% central locks, about 8% code box, and about 2% smart homes, miscellaneous devices. All the access is centralized through Rently so that we're not passing codes to people all day long. So that's our stack on that side of things. On the application side, we partner with a service called Findigs or Findigs. I've actually never known how you pronounce it.
It's Findigs, yeah.
It's Findigs. You see, when I joined Evernest, I called it Findigs, and everyone else called it Findigs.
Yeah.
I really did.
Matthew's heard it from the horse's mouth.
That's
It's
their
Findigs.
problem. Yeah.
From the horse's mouth. There we go. So from the horse's mouth, it's Findigs. And, they do a great job of flagging alerts to us through, all the places they're aggregating data. And then, of course, once a decision is made through Findigs, we facilitate the rest of the lease and the deposit through AppFolio, which is our PMS.
Very good. Where do you think the leasing market's headed? It feels like there's a bunch of, there's a bunch of supply coming on. There's a lot of build to rent. I think it feels like residents are starting to have their pick. And I'm curious from where you said, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but can you opine on where you think leasing's headed over the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, looking for my crystal ball. I can't quite look at it, but I always like to look at leads listings. We have great visibility to how non-Evernest listings perform, so we're able to really stack ourselves up against the comp. So from like, we can understand how we're doing versus the market, but then, also I think it's valuable to remove us from the market and understand just how the market's, moving from a demand standpoint. I'd say, every slow season is tough. Over the COVID years, the peak seasons were stretched pretty wide from like early March to late October. I'd say this is probably one of the first years since COVID where we're kind of back to the normal trend of, your April, May to, late September. So, kind of the way I look at things is as you get into September and October, you got to move your inventory kind of like November 15th is your date, kind of before holidays. People, demand really falls off a cliff around then, and then won't pick it back up until the next peak. So what I see is, select markets, a lot of stuff in the Sun Belt, a lot of stuff in the Mid-Atlantic area, so that's Texas, areas of Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee for sure. North Carolina has been a tougher market this year. There's just been so much supply. I mean, supply is the kind of the theme, and that's what's caused rents to contract in some of these markets. More so as we exit peak. You think about all this new inventory coming, both in multifamily and single family. You got a lot of build-to-rent communities. Thinking about places like Clarksville, Tennessee, and Columbia, Tennessee, the Nashville area. Really the entire, like most metro areas in North Carolina, Huntsville as well. You got a lot of build to rent. Texas, there's stuff in Temple and Houston that's coming to mind. Most of these places, you've got all this new single family inventory and they're concessing heavily. So, you with your, as an owner with, an asset that's maybe 10, 20, 30 years old, you are fighting a brand new home that's probably larger, probably got the most updated features, and they're offering 1 to 2 months free. And that's the front that you're fighting.
Yeah.
And so, in some ways you've got to meet that. But, the nice news is building permits are, kind of after the 2024, 2025 years are down. So, I think that points to us that rents will rebound probably sometime around next peak, and will likely be around for a little bit. So, I think it's a matter of, localized areas are struggling more than others, in terms of both supply, and there's a direct impact on rent trends.
And what do you think from a technology standpoint? Like, what's the future? We started using digital lock boxes probably a decade ago, and that was cutting edge at the time. Now everybody's using it. Like, where do you think, like 5 years from now, with all the technology trends that are coming online, if you were going to go out and rent a home, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think from a technology standpoint, I think the lockbox type of stuff is going to stick around. Those Bluetooth lockboxes are just, so consistent in a way that like smart homes aren't. I think there are a bunch of like other products out there that aren't access control, kind of like, Ring, like that type of stuff that a lot of people are talking about, but they don't have like access control. Something I've noticed with the smart locks, and I'd say I have pretty good experience, a range of experience in smart locks. So I've seen them kind of at their best and also, unfortunately, at their worst. It's a product that just, I don't think it's quite figured it out yet, the consistent connectivity. I think.
Or the battery life.
Yeah, you're just challenged by battery life, sometimes cell reception, firmware getting outdated. Those smart locks just seem to kind of hit their, end of their life in just a couple of years. So I think, I don't know that we're quite there for the jump to like smart home technology everywhere. But, it's definitely the way things are trending. Probably a year ago or so, I did a study, maybe 2 years ago, I did a study on, the top amenities that renters are looking for. And, I was kind of surprised to see, you'd think that people are looking for pools and fitness centers and driveways and garages and, stainless steel appliances, like, traditional features. And about 2 years ago, I remember seeing a study that renters are more often than not searching for smart home amenities. So there is a desire. I think renters want that. In my rental home, I've got an Ecobee and that type of stuff, and like automated sprinklers, and our residents love that. So I think people have a desire for that type of stuff, and I think it's just a matter of the providers making it more consistent and like a more consistent technology, and I think adoption will continue to move up.
Yeah, it's about spending wise dollars on technology, not just across a broad spectrum, right?
Yeah, kind of another piece to the technology I think is interesting is, access, just broadly with access control, is I think the industry is really, SFR, less so MFR, but SFR, really trying to figure out like access control, scams, verified renters, all that type of stuff. One thing I think, Rently does well is, the ID, selfie, all that verification. I think, something I'm trying to think about and just be thoughtful of from the resident experience is like friction. Some of these devices, in order to obtain access to like a smart home device or any Bluetooth device, anything like that, you've got all these steps that people have to go through, friction, right? You've got to upload your ID, got to give a selfie, you might have to give credit card information.
Yep.
Then you got to, fill out a thing that says like, yeah, I didn't hear about this from Craigslist. And then, got to click a thing that says, yes, I know, I'm talking to Evernest, and it's this weird balance of, you want fraud prevention to be good because we don't want, stolen keys and stolen access to our systems, but also you don't want to build a moat too thick for, a resident to get in. So I think, relative to like all of our access control, I'd say, this is a big conversation with, how many systems, how much friction do you put in place to protect the asset while not going too far.
And I saw something on LinkedIn the other day that said over half of this one group's applicants were fraudulent. That seemed like a high number to me. I don't know if you saw that. Now I'd be curious what percentage of applicants do you think are fraudulent?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question. Man, I've studied this extensively, and I've found some very interesting results. So, market to market, we're in a couple of markets, Evernest, where like nationwide, like probably top 3 metro areas in fraud. Atlanta comes to mind. Memphis is up there. I remember we're not in Tuscaloosa, but Tuscaloosa was like for a couple of years the number one fraud market for rental related.
What?
Roll Tide.
I don't
Roll
think
Tide. You meant Auburn.
Yeah,
you meant
Auburn's what definitely.
Auburn definitely is a bunch of fraudsters down
Yeah,
there.
I knew I'd start something when I bring up the T word. So, anywhere from like 7 to 12% of residents are like outright fraudulent, meaning giving you fake IDs, fake proof of income, some sort of like.
Well, I had a fake ID when I was in Tuscaloosa, so that makes sense. Maybe people are just
not surprising to me.
Maybe 7% are just accidentally giving the wrong ID, pulling the wrong ID out.
He wasn't renting houses; he was buying beer. That was his problem.
Yeah.
Nobody would hire me. That's why I had to start a business. So sorry, I got you off track.
That's all right. Well, so I mean, I think what we're trying to, Evernest is trying to solve for the Matthews out there in Tuscaloosa. We, want to catch the folks that have fake IDs, and we've got great software through our partnership with FindDigs to catch that. Now, so we've got, anywhere from 7 to 12%, more so in certain areas than others. There's kind of like that second level of, you'd call like firmly unqualified renters. So you've got people that have like poor rental history, just bad history or outstanding debts, criminal history, that type of stuff. I remember Richmond, Virginia was either fraud or firmly unqualified renters, about 25% for a couple of years running. Baltimore peaked at a couple of years back at about 40%, which wild.
That is wild.
About. So, and I remember, my time at UDR, we had gotten down to, identifying fraud so well and being able to look in arrears and catch it. I remember once upon a time, we actually found a couple of folks that we had in arrears been able to identify that we're fraudulent, but we're actually paying rent consistently. So it's kind of like, I was almost shocked by that, we've found this thin sliver of, good paying fraudsters.
Yeah, they pulled out the wrong ID. I mean, that makes total sense to me.
It happens.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen.
So anywhere from 7 to 12%, and then unqualified renters, like firmly unqualified. I'm not talking about income and credit. Those are denials you can override with a guarantor or supplemental income or a cosign or something like that. But those firmly unqualified renters, certain markets can be pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying. I mean, if you think about 12% of all applications are fraudulent. I mean, 1 in 10 is kind of scary, or really 1 in 9.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I would imagine it's harder also for like just the local landlord to determine that, to catch that before they enter their house.
If they're not using some sort of technology. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom was. I grew up. My mom had a rental house, and she just went with the gut feeling. And then one day, the attorney and the flight attendant that were married moved in, gave her 3 checks, and all 3 of the checks bounced, and it took her forever to get them out. So, fraud's been happening for 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dialogue with peers in the industry about this, and it's interesting how different organizations feel about this. My take on this is leasing is not about just filling vacancies; it's about protecting the asset and getting like a good paying renter in there. Sometimes you've got organizations that can lease a home in 2 days, but their delinquency rates less than 90 days into move-in are 10%, which tells you you've got a screening problem. For us, I think it's one metric I point to for our application screening processes and setting the right thresholds. I think tells us that we do a great job of this. Protecting the owner's asset, getting good, consistently paying renters in. Over Q2, we had, if I recall off the top of my head right, it was 14 of over 1,000 move-ins. Only 14 went delinquent within the first 90 days. Same trend for that. Well, that was Q1 and then also Q2. So for us, we take a data-driven approach to filling doors. It's not just the first tenant that responds and says, "Yeah, I'm interested." Well, we hold a line, and that's why we've got a separate department, this underwriting team that makes those decisions. So
that was me back in the day.
That was coming out of my mouth. I was like, Spencer, why don't you tell us how that works when somebody shows up with the cash?
This is a true story. This is the only reason I hired Evernest back in 2008 is because I had a horrible experience, because I was like, I'm tired of like driving out here and showing this house. And I let go of my screening criteria and was like, plus they said, we've got like 2 or 3 months up front. And I was like, shoot, yeah, I'll take that money.
Yeah. That was the old landlord's money. Somewhere right now, that landlord.
They just robbed a bank, and that was that money, and they gave it to me. And I took it, and then I had to evict them, 6 months later. And I'll never forget calling Brian Miles and saying, dude, I don't want to go through this eviction. I need you all to help me. And Brian graciously got Evernest involved, and
Spencer was our first client. He had 14 people not paying rent out of the 25 or 30 he gave us. So
there's no doubt it was rough.
Yeah, especially for it was an eye-opening moment. I think maybe 3 months ago, I had a conversation with a friend of a friend that was looking at property management, and all these people. So just I'll kind of have a couple of examples here of like people and like the experience and the amount of concern. It's all people that are kind of like accidental landlords or like first-time investors, or like this is your first rental home. And so 3 months ago, I spoke to a friend of a friend, and asked him like, "Hey, what is your number one concern? Like, what are you trying to solve for with property management?" And she said, "I'm just terrified that my people aren't going to pay rent, and I don't know how to enforce that." And to me, I was just thinking, I think the day before I had run our quarters data, and I was like, well, let me tell you, we've got this figured out. And then a couple months back, I was talking with a close friend of mine about his 2 rentals, and he had mentioned that He found his renters on Facebook Marketplace. Don't advertise on Facebook Marketplace if unless you've got really great screening. Just kind of a word to the wise. And he told me within 3 months he had to evict 2 out of 2 tenants.
Oh my
From
gosh.
his house. And he told me how painful that process was. I just think it's interesting how of all the people I'm talking to, got another friend that's looking at property management right now. Same thing from him. He just has no idea how to enforce someone paying rent. To me it's a big concern out there that I wish that we could connect with all of these property owners of 1-2 doors that are just going in on the blind, looking at Facebook Marketplace, bringing in tenants, the first person to respond. There are solutions out there for you. So
I think that's my job, right? To get in front of those people.
That's right. Clearly, Spencer's not doing his job in
Thanks
Denver.
a lot, Brett.
Well,
you go get them, and then we'll help them out.
I mean, there's no doubt. Like if we did nothing else but get a good resident in the home, we should be paid the full amount of the lease. I mean, I know we do so much more, but it all starts, and I think you said this a little bit ago, Brett, is it all starts with getting the right person in there. And when you get the right person in there, then good things happen. And I think that also goes to property managers that are out there. If you get the right person like Brett running your leasing department, I mean, I learned so much just talking to him every single time we connect. He just clearly is very competent, clearly passionate about leasing homes. And Brett, appreciate all the hard work that you've done. You've had a big summer, so we're coming out of 6 months of y'all really grinding, and it's even funny on the backside. They've had some of the best days in September. 1 day leasing day. His team signed 29 leases 1 day this week already. So
Monday. Yep.
Just an incredible. Yeah, and some people say, well, some of those probably came over from the weekend, but his team signs leases over the weekend too. So, just an incredible amount of work that's getting done there.
And he's not on the market. We actually locked him up with a contract, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you can pay his $20 million buyout, then you can certainly hire him.
Or $70 million. All right. Well, Brett,
I get a commission.
That's right. Brett, thanks for being here with us. We appreciate it. Thanks for all your time, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Happy to jump on and talk about leasing.